best part of the cracker discourse is that we can refer to something that we're considering a slur in its context without having to like dead name or like non-dead name thing. Like we don't have to call
Can
it
you
the C
keep
word all the
name
time.
out of it? Can you keep
So,
name out of it? This is kind of racist.
What?
What did you call name just now, Elysium?
Dead
Nothing.
name.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah, what did you call me?
Yeah, Chinchilla, you were dead naming me
Dead.
for a couple of weeks. I was really offended by that.
You've become
Hey,
Yeah.
Kino, how you doing?
Yeah, but
Okay.
speaking of dead naming, hey, dead name.
Hey, actually, I'm alive. Name. I'm alive.
alive.
More like late name.
Yes, I am late.
You were late.
Yeah, we were thinking
I'm sorry.
that you were banned of like Twitch because everybody that's a little bit left of me is like pretty much getting banned right now because of the fact that they like to
Not true.
call people words.
Hold on. Who was banned? Okay, so Vosh, Leftist Owl,
Your mom.
Hassan. Okay, who else?
Imam is on the left. Oh, got it.
Okay, all right. I first thought of Iman as Pokimane, but you
No,
got me.
sorry.
Oh my
Yeah.
god.
Also, I had to
No,
say,
Unironically, I think if my
Chow,
mom started streaming on Twitch, she would probably do better than me. What's up?
you're. Is that a turtleneck?
Yes.
Chow looks like
Yeah.
a fucking.
It looks
Villain.
good on you. You look sleek as fuck. Honestly, I have to I'd throw it out there.
Except it really camouflages with the dark background, so if you really
Yeah.
think about it, you kind of just see my floating head.
Kind of, yeah. I guess you need
Nice.
just a bit more lighting in the background, and it would be perfect.
You could.
Do you just tell me to get more lighting?
I'm sorry. I didn't
Name,
want to
donate me $100 and I'll get the lighting that you want me to get. Okay.
Oh,
But
dude, I
go to
should show you my
already
lighting
spent-
setup.
Do you know what the fuck I did? Do you know what you know what I've been doing? Okay. I'm just a bit frustrated
a lot
because of it was a lot of installation like last week.
Elysium, how is your lighting?
It's great, actually. Kind of superb.
Yeah, he has the fucking sun. My god.
I
Sun
sit
is
in a dark
shining.
room
That's
all the
kinda
time,
sus.
and no one ever knows.
The heels.
Elysium is streaming from his basement with no lighting on at all.
Yeah, true.
Okay, so I hope you guys have been doing good this week. So today we have another little practice. So we're gonna talk about a topic about Ukraine. So yeah, basically we chat a little bit like the former podcast
Elysium
was
is
about like,
alive.
Belarus.
Sort of.
So the natural progression is then to talk about Ukraine as well, which makes a lot of sense. So we're going to talk about the relationships between like Ukraine, the EU, and Russia mostly. I would assume maybe like also the US. That being said, like welcome everybody. We got a couple of guests, right? The panelists. We got Elysium, we got Neyman, and we got JHR Live. So yeah, welcome everybody. That being said, like I didn't know who brought it up that we should talk about Ukraine, but I think it was actually Chow that was bringing it up.
It was. Yeah,
Um,
because like everybody's been talking about it. It was
yeah.
breaking news last week, and it's probably something that we ought to talk about.
Mhm. So that being said, yeah, let's get into it. Unfortunately, we're not gonna talk about like the racial slur debate. So
That's
right?
next week. Don't worry.
That's next week. So don't worry about that. So you actually you just copy paste like whatever people are talking about on Twitch, and then you talk about it as well. That's how you do cloud chasing, right?
It's
how it works.
called salient issues, otherwise known as discourse.
Oh
Go
yes,
on.
tell us about the salience of the issues. I love it.
Oh
Well,
yeah.
people are talking about it, so that's how we judge salience.
Okay.
Okay. Whatever. So let's get into the actual topic and let's have actual discourse instead of like doing dumb memes. So yeah, Joe, you can kick it off, and then we can hear a name and then resume. So
Sure. So to begin the discussion on Ukraine and Russia, we have to go all the way back to, I don't know, Catherine the Great, whatnot.
Yeah, the Byzantine Empire. Can we start
Byzantine
with the
Empire,
Byzantine
yeah.
Empire? So
Or no, the Mongols, because the Mongols successfully invaded Russia and probably.
I wanna know about Ivan the Great and why he or Ivan Terrible and why he adopted the Christian Orthodox faith. So
yes, and
not
now
Muslim faith.
this is where we stop the joke. This is the joke is now dead. It is no longer funny because it is now targeted to me. There's some
what?
history. There's some history. There's some
Are
history.
you Orthodox Christian?
Cold War, Soviet Russia, USSR, otherwise known as, and just fast forward all the way to today, or like the modern day, around 2000 plus. Ukraine is like an independent state away from Russia, but there's been some conflicts going back and forth. There's some commonalities between the two, culturally, linguistically, ethnically, population wise as well. And Russia kind of has this narrative, Putin also has this narrative that Ukraine is basically Russia, and kind of implying that, yeah, if we wanted to take Ukraine, then it's our right to do so. Now, really fast forwarded to today, and within this year, last spring, Russia starts to amass a lot of troops alongside the border, and Ukraine, more so recently now, has been more aligned with the European Union as well as with the United States. Them wanting to join NATO is something that has recently caused Russia to amass even more troops. And this conflict is intertwined with the civil war that's going on there, the rebels that are backed by Russia in some provinces in Ukraine, Russia taking Crimea away from Ukraine. And Russia and Putin, they really don't want Ukraine to become a part of NATO. Ukraine thinks otherwise, and so then here comes kind of this security dilemma situation between Ukraine and its allies, along with Russia not wanting, well, basically NATO bases alongside that border. Yeah, they would not like that. I think that was a pretty good overview. Yeah.
We lost our moderator.
Okay,
No,
I am the moderator now.
Yeah.
no, it wasn't. Because
How
like
do you?
one thing that like you talk about like the recent developments are like at the same point, like or are happening at the same point, but the Crimean stuff happened earlier before like the current like new like distinct like battle of the
Chinchilla,
east of
do you know
Ukraine.
where the Russian troops are?
They're
They're
on
in
the
Crimea.
eastern border. Yeah,
They're in Crimea.
yeah, but they already have to annex that. We don't recognize that, but it's like the
Of
Russian
course,
troops
it's
have-
related to Crimea, you fool. Okay, Crimea was in 2014, by the way,
Yeah,
for anybody who didn't know, and now is 2021. All right,
Yeah.
it's been a couple of years,
and yeah.
but there are still developments going on. Okay.
So yeah, in that case, let's go to name. What do you think about this topic?
I think the main idea I wanted to bring here, which is an idea I found really interesting when doing research, is that when Russia made the decision to annex Crimea, there's a distinct possibility, and the more I read about it, the more it makes sense to me, that by dragging Ukraine into a conflict that cannot be resolved diplomatically, and well, obviously Russia can decide whether it gets resolved diplomatically or not, they actually make it impossible for Ukraine to fit in all of the characteristics that a candidate has to fit for to apply for joining NATO. Now, the specific rule I looked up in as far as NATO membership goes, it's a bit openly worded. If NATO really wanted to have Ukraine join anyways, they actually could. But I think it's fair to say that taking Crimea definitely had this extra bonus of basically making it almost impossible for Ukraine to join NATO at this point. It would drag it, and it definitely is it is a threat. It is a threat that the conflict could get worse if I'm sure Putin would see it as an escalation if the West aligned Ukraine into a military partnership.
Okay, and let's go to Elysium in the case.
Yeah, I guess for opening, Russia has done troop buildups on and off along the Ukrainian border for the past few years. Typically, it coincides with summits or some internal thing going on in Russia, and it wants to use it as posturing. Last year, there was a big buildup that was like abnormally large compared to previous ones, or just like a little bit long, right before I believe it was some summit that was happening where stuff like this where these similar concerns are brought up, and now there's this one. As I begin, I believe this one's like larger than any of the past ones, and there also doesn't seem to be, besides wanting to get a call with President Biden, there doesn't seem to be many posturing things that are going on as well. But I guess my overall real take is Russia bad, and that's about it. Yeah.
So my general question to you guys would be: consider that Russia always has seen like NATO as a threat. Him building up troops within along the border of his country, we consider that as a threat. Isn't what NATO is doing a threat as well for Russia?
That's definitely how Putin sees it. Yes, he sees any nation close to Russia flipping over to NATO as a threat. I feel like he's very in a sort of Cold War view of putting like pawns and bases closer or further away from his own interests. It seems like his understanding of geopolitics is definitely informed by his past as a KGB member, as a member of Soviet Russia, and that's prolonged in his current foreign policy.
So
so-
Russia likes to get super butthurt about NATO expansion, and like go back to like that the U.S. and the USSR had a deal about it before the USSR dissolved about where NATO's borders would be, and it's moved on since then. But it's all a bunch of dumb posturing. NATO's like a defensive voluntary alliance. The idea that it's comparable to Russia's aggressive actions is ludicrous. And Russia plays like this double speak game diplomatically, where any of its troop movements are for Russia's security, and they have complete sovereignty over where their troops are deployed within their country. And everyone should just accept that. But simultaneously, other sovereign nations moving their troops around represent a grave threat to Russia, and it's logically inconsistent.
Joe?
You're muted.
I was just
Fuck my life, okay.
not
That's why
saying
Elysium was
anything.
able to cut me off. That's why Elysium was able to cut me off. Usually I overpower people here. Never mind. That's besides the point. So,
Oh wow.
is Putin informed by Cold War politics? Maybe the answer is yes, but I don't know who else wouldn't. If we're viewing Russia's aggression or like putting troops along the border as aggression as well, in the same way that he views whatever NATO is going to be doing in Ukraine if Ukraine does join the NATO, if it does join the defensive alliance. The reason why I put defensive in quotes is because oftentimes people can't tell whether or not you're going to be using something that's for defensive or offensive purposes because they're literally the same thing. Guns used for defense can be used for offense. People can change their minds. And so then, of course, it's always going to be providing a security risk. And I think that's pretty fair for Putin and Russia to be kind of freaked out that that Ukraine is going to be joining NATO. And this is a lot different than other countries joining NATO because it just so happens that Ukraine borders Russia. And so then something that's like kind of similar back then was, well, the Cuban Missile Crisis. What was the Soviet Union
the
able to
Baltic
get
states
away?
border Russia. Russia already has
It
NATO
was
borders.
Turkey. It was Turkey.
Okay.
It was Turkey, right? That's what I was referring to. Turkey had the United States had nuclear missiles in Turkey, able to be in the vicinity of Russia. And so
Mhm.
then the deal was, Russia takes, or USSR takes nuclear missiles out of Cuba, and the United States does that out of Turkey. That was the deal.
Okay, but
And
NATO,
and
the
like
Baltic, the Baltic states are already NATO members. They're already
Yeah,
bordering
it's
Russia.
about
there's
a
no
change
there's no
more than-
and
strategic
you would
change.
want more?
Yeah,
It
exactly.
doesn't represent a strategic change. If
Well, it does. It does.
NATO already borders Russia, then the idea that like, oh, Ukraine borders Russia.
So you would. So, I mean, like, if I were Russia, I would want more NATO states border me.
Okay, but
change this
good. Yeah, Russia definitely doesn't want it, but you don't get to make a non-representative comment that, like, this is going to now allow a NATO border to Russia when it already exists. That's not like a significant change.
I'll take that back.
Like, I mean, Russia's obviously going to posture and all
kind
this.
of fair, but like nothing that I've said really has changed. Though. Maybe I was pointing it out that way, and I apologize for that.
No,
I
no,
was not.
okay.
I was unaware of that.
Right.
I genuinely think
if I
that
were
the
Russia,
fact that
I wouldn't want Ukraine to be a NATO member and like is a good chunk of the border, especially if the European Union is right there. The European Union is probably going to be supporting Ukraine as well.
Why?
What do you mean why?
Yeah, why?
Because Ukraine represents a buffer state between Russia and the European Union. And so then, like, of course, when it comes to geopolitics, Ukraine is pretty significant. And if it goes to one side or the other, like in a totality, then that is going to be really detrimental to the side that, isn't on their side.
Sure. I understand there's a bunch of reasons. Well, there are several reasons for Russia to not want something. But just because Russia doesn't want it doesn't mean it gets to impose it upon Ukraine. It's like, that's where like a weird disconnect. That Ukraine can or cannot join NATO, can or cannot ally with the EU, has to maintain the status of being a Russian buffer state.
Because we're discussing from the Russian perspective.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Aren't the demands of Russia just like couldn't one say that they're merely diplomatic? Maybe not the troop buildup. Okay.
No.
That shit's pretty scary. All right. But everything leading to that or before, from the video call as well as Putin's call to, hey, Biden, let's talk about this. Let's talk about this.
No, this is like an absurd framing. Russia annexed land from Ukraine. Russia's been fueling a semi-civil war in eastern Ukraine for years. The idea that Russia's approaching this as a diplomatically neutral or just like has interests here and not as an aggressive like causer of unrest is silly.
And so then what's her prescription?
Russia can go fuck itself. Yeah, that's
Russia
the prescription.
Go fuck itself. That's very interesting, especially when Russia just happens to
Russia
be
is the aggressor.
A country. Okay, see, this is the problem with you, Elysium. Okay, is that like if you're the aggressor, you could go fuck yourself. Okay, if you're the aggressor, you get the death penalty. If you're an aggressor, like what in your mind, whoever is the aggressor, they're just fucked. Okay.
Yeah,
and the problem with you is that this is going to cause problems. The problem with you is that this is going to cause a conflict, an actual war. Okay.
What do you mean an actual war? There already is an actual war right now. There is an actual war in Ukraine.
You want it to be more of a war? With the United States involved?
No, I wouldn't. I think that'd be bad.
Okay,
so would be worse.
So what is the prescription then? Okay, what does Russia go fuck themselves mean? Can you please tell me more? Do I actually have to go to Putin?
Okay, no.
And stick my dick in his ass?
Some of the prescriptions would be so we've got multiple levels of prescriptions. One, if you're willing to like play the build-up game, you can threaten the sanctions and that there will be retaliation if Russia violates the geographical sovereignty of another country again, or of Ukraine again. You can cut them off financially for more stuff. These all go like there's a bunch of economic tier stuff you can do. You can sell more weapons to Ukraine. So both these things are we can do. The other thing you could do is you can just add Ukraine to NATO. You could, if that proves too diplomatically hard to do in the current climate, you could build NATO installations at the permission of Ukraine, in Ukraine, that provides a pseudo NATO defense to it. There are plenty of options. And we've exercised a good half of them already of saying, if you're going to invade this country, you're going to be financially cut off from Europe and the rest of the world. You're going to get sanctions, and we're going to lend lease almost style probably to the Ukrainian army. We've got American military members training the current Ukrainian army. Like, we've stepped up a lot of our relationship with Ukraine in response to this. Absolutely. And there's more you could do if you wanted to.
Okay.
I'm a little bit confused by your guys' back and forth as well. Like, my impression, correct me if I'm wrong, Chao, my impression was that you were describing like just describing the Putin's perspective. So like perceiving NATO encroaching as a threat, military bases as a threat, etc., etc.
I may have misinterpreted. Yeah.
Was that what you were doing? Because I didn't feel like you were doing a prescriptive description.
Ukraine,
yeah, exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Well, no, but like, okay, never mind. I can understand that. There's like a difference between like what is a justified perspective versus like what is versus what's going to be propaganda tier, or like what's going to be your posturing perspective.
Okay, so one thing why I asked why I asked like the buffer state, like I genuinely don't see like any interest for the European Union besides the fact that they want to do trade and that kind of stuff with Ukraine. Because if you're gonna make the assumption that they want to have a buffer state, the Baltics borders Russia, Finland borders Russia, Norway borders Russia. One of the candidates, like Turkey, like I've seen like Ukraine slowly moving towards like wanting to join the European Union, wanting to join NATO, and I think that's genuine why Russia is like upset about that. That being said, like the European Union doesn't want to have like Ukraine within the European Union because it's still corrupt. It has a lot of issues within their own borders. Also, they don't want to like import like those border disputes basically within like the NATO, right? That they have with Russia, that kind of stuff, which name brought up like already, right? Like if you were to invite them to NATO, you would have you would inherit those issues. So yeah, I don't necessarily see like this buffer state like acceptable.
I would say this.
Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Those are the three Baltic states that you guys are talking about, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's also Poland through Kaliningrad.
So how is it a buffer state? How are those how are those a threat to Russia when they are not bordering any other NATO country? Because they don't.
But it's Poland.
They do not have geographic connections to any other NATO country.
Poland is connected to Lithuania and is a NATO member, and also Poland shares a border with Russia through Kaliningrad.
Has failed me? Has Google truly failed me?
No, like because this includes Belarus. But yeah, Poland also connects to the Baltic states, and you can do it by the Baltic Sea, but. I
want to just throw out like by the same argument that we understand why Russia sees Ukraine as joining NATO, joining EU as an encroachment of Western interests into its backyard. We can understand why
Lithuania isn't even connected to Russia.
It is through Kaliningrad.
Do you guys know what
it's not connected.
Holy
look up Kaliningrad. There is a little bit of Russia that's on the Baltic Sea. I forgot the technical name for this. It's when a country has like a separated part. It was a specific deal so that Russia could have a port on the Baltic Sea.
Yeah. But Poland does connect landwise. If you really want, like what Chao was saying, if you really wanted a land connection, it connects to the Baltics.
And it doesn't connect to Russia.
Not mainland Russia.
It
connects to Kaliningrad, I think.
Oh my god. Okay, so then
but
now we're
connects
just
to
playing
Lithuania.
like a game of like what is that? The transitive property? Like what? Now Germany is connected to Russia because Germany's connected to this
No,
country.
it's not.
and
I'm
then-
just talking about
No.
Kaliningrad.
Like what is going on?
You don't know
I'm
what
literally-
Kaliningrad is, Chow. That's basically you know
I'm
there's
literally
like an
talking about
exclave.
part of Russia.
Yeah, former East Prussia is part of Russia.
Oh
now.
wait, Chen, was that the thing? Was that the thing that you showed me on call like a couple, maybe like 2 weeks ago? That like Russia has a part. Russia has like
Kaliningrad.
some land that is not the mainland of Russia.
Yes, exactly,
it's
and it's on the Baltic
there?
Sea. It's between Lithuania, Poland, and
Yes,
Estonia.
because that
I
is
think.
because that is a
Belarus.
really that is a massive security risk to mainland Russia.
No, it's not. But if we're talking, technically
These are
there's
just
a border shared.
technicalities. Name it.
Well, yeah, but Russia could, for example,
technicalities.
like it's a technicality, but Russia could completely legitimately deploy troops. That's why in Kaliningrad, it belongs to Russia. They could deploy troops there, and they could stage them in from there. It would be seen as really fucking aggressive. It would ring all sorts of alarm bells, but they could do it. It's something to consider.
Maybe that's why they don't do it.
Yeah, probably.
To be
But
fair,
All right.
it's also
I
like
love-
economically important to Russia because it's their only port on the Baltic Sea. Otherwise, they like if they want to go into northern European seas, they have to go all the way through the fucking frozen north to get there.
Doesn't St. Petersburg still count as on the Baltic Sea? Or no? Or is it too far?
True.
Does
St.
it?
Petersburg is on the Baltic Sea.
Okay, never mind. Sorry.
It might get more icy though, but it's
Yeah.
definitely not as good.
Yeah, it's a winter port. That's
Yeah.
it's
It is really strategically important. They negotiated to have that post Soviet Russia. It's like really important for Russia.
Yeah.
To jump
so
back. Okay.
But Chow. So you figured out the geographic situation of
Yeah,
Canada.
I had to do a geography Google search.
Yeah, you can. Next week we're gonna do a test, and you're gonna pick
Yeah.
all the European countries apart. Like
Listen, okay,
which-
there was
which
one
country is
class.
which.
There was one class in college that I withdrew. It was a geography in Africa. The first test was to name all of the African countries and put them on a map. All right, I
Mhm.
withdrew from that shit.
That's like the meme. Do you know Africa? Name every single country.
Okay,
It's
easy.
hard. Okay, there are a lot of fucking countries in Africa. Africa's fucking huge. It's a huge
It is.
continent.
Okay, jumping back. We were
Yeah.
talking about the disruptions to Ukraine like joining NATO and stuff. Yeah, so one of the big instigators or one of the big triggering elements was when the Ukraine's government moved away from being pro-Russia towards being pro-EU, and we saw like the not immediate, but like near immediate invasion of Crimea and annexation to not dissuade that, but to like as the turning of seeing that Ukraine is moving away from Russia to ensure its interests. And then since then we've had like this prolonged civil unrest being fueled by Russia in the east to like continue to, from my understanding, take chunks out of the east of Ukraine. It seems, or just outright invasion, I guess, as a pretext for invasion. But like yeah, so these things started to escalate and become more real as Ukraine has moved further away from Russia for sure. It's like that is one of the elements that Russia is looking at. But
Element.
I like
Total war.
I feel like there's a very it's hard to hear like this is how Russia views it, where when like I don't feel like nearly any of these things are justified.
Sure. So then Russia views it as a security risk. I think I already explained that pretty well. Russia also sees it as an economic opportunity. So then Russia has like this partnership with the ex-Soviet countries, and they're trying to, consolidate a market so that they could become self-sustaining at least regionally, right? So then something that I found out recently, this is like Paul Krugman's theory, is that in order to have a self-sustaining market, you have to have a population of 250 people. Russia alone does not reach that. And it's trying to create this with ex-Soviet countries. And Ukraine's pretty important to that because Ukraine has a big chunk of population.
Okay.
And Ukraine has, as we've already discussed before, has been moving away from having any sort of ties with Russia, and more so with the European Union. This is kind of really bad from like the Russia's economics kind of strategy to that. So then, kind of to put it in perspective from the other world powers in the world, the United States has pretty much the WTO as well as trade partners with, well, other developed countries. You have China with the Belt and Road Initiative, and they've been making a lot of headway with that. And well, what does Russia do? Because if we're going to be talking about power politics in the world, those are the three countries: Russia,
But-
United States, and China.
Yeah,
Russia really
that's a
doesn't
good
have
point.
that. Okay,
Russia doesn't do anything though. That's the problem. They're an oil mafia state now. Russia's become irrelevant.
Russia has become irrelevant. This is
Economically,
just not true.
They're an oil state now. They don't develop. The Obama quote was amazing. He was like asked like how he thinks about Russia. And he's like, I don't think about Russia very much. They don't innovate. They don't develop anything. They're not like they're not a significant player in any of these fields anymore.
They are a regional power. That's what he said.
Being an oil state doesn't mean you have no economic power. Quite to the contrary.
They also still have, I believe, the largest nuclear arsenal. And if they're so irrelevant, even economically, then why are we so afraid of their military buildup alongside the border? Of course,
Because they're an
player.
aggressive state that's willing to use military to
They are
achieve its
one of the
political
strongest
end.
aggressive states in this world.
Sure.
And so then, of course, they're going to be relevant. So please don't.
I'm not saying they're irrelevant. I'm just saying
and then the fact that they are, in like by your regards, currently irrelevant. What they are trying to do is to bring back relevancy. Is this not a concern that we ought to recognize?
Yeah.
Russia
and when a country's way to be relevant is to sword rattle and kill people, then like they're a threat, but they're not.
But they're not what? What are they not? They're a threat, but they're not what? A strong threat?
No, irregardless of like how militarily significant they are, this is not a country that we care about outside of like the aggressive things they're gonna do.
What is that?
I guess and oil, because Russia's not developing stuff anymore.
We don't care about any other country until we care about them. That is literally what you just told me.
No, until they're invading people. If Russia's not hacking people, causing aggressive actions around all their neighbors.
About a lot of things that a country does when we care about it. Okay, that is literally what you are telling me.
We care about them. Great. Yep, I agree. We care about Russia a lot.
So, Name, what do you think about
What is
this?
your point then? Oh my god.
I think Russia is more and more relevant. We've mentioned a couple podcasts ago. We've discussed, for example, the gas pipeline into Europe. How how we felt about the increasing dependency Europe has on Russian energy. What might be the consequences for politically as far as that is concerned. We do see Putin projecting military power. Obviously, it's less subtle. He's not playing the game the way we want people to play the game. China's a better competitor in the sense that it is willing to compete more in economic and free market terms, well, relatively speaking. But they are making their relevancy in their own way, right? It's like, sure, you can call them an oil state at this point. Their industry seems they haven't really developed like world-spanning industries outside of energy, but oil states can be extremely relevant to modern geopolitics. You just have to look at Saudi Arabia and all their buddies, and Russia is if Russia is that, then we have to take them into account.
Yeah, that being said, before anybody talks, I got a donation. So somebody questions me to mute Name. Like, yeah, he's really obnoxious this stream. I don't know why. Like, but yeah, so you get again 1 minute mute. So
Okay.
there you go. But thanks for that donation. So
this is literally the prime scheme. Give me money so I can pick off panelists.
Hell yeah. So. But
I think I stated that poorly. Yeah, because it's caused a lot. Okay, so if we compare Russia now to the USSR, the like decline that is experienced is like catastrophic and dramatic to like I don't know, like an incredible degree, like almost a cartoonish degree, that you could have like one of the two world superpowers now like no longer economically influential, no longer innovating new things, no longer being a
When were they ever an innovator?
international
Even as the USSR?
during yeah, absolutely. The USSR was a technological innovator, absolutely.
In what way? I can name 2
Yeah.
and only 2. Actually, no, never mind. I can name 3 and only 3.
Okay. I mean, I feel free to look into that later. That's fine.
Wait, me or you? Because I'm
You.
asking you if you know.
I'm
Because
not. I don't have a list. I don't have a list of inventions from the USSR in front of me. I'm sorry, but like.
Wait, but you just
if
said
you
that
think
they
that's
were an innovator
contentious.
before.
Yep.
And I'm challenging you on that because I disagree.
Then it doesn't feel like a fruitful thing to contend.
Okay,
I'm happy.
USSR is an innovator. The space race, they were actually leading for quite a while. Then they industrialized their entire country into one of the leading heavy industries of the world over the course of like 20 to 40 years. That was a great success of the economic plans as far as like steel production, heavy
that
industry.
Has occurred in other countries that typically doesn't.
Yes,
occur
but they sped run it. They did a speed run of it, and they did it quite successfully.
I wouldn't count that, but okay.
Basically, the way the economic plans worked under USSR was they were hyper focused on like thing after thing. The Russia post revolution was a shit show. There were famines. The agriculture was lacking. They had no industry. It was basically the burning remains of a feudal state, and they managed to turn that into a state that could actually compete with the US. Their scientists were leading in many different fields. They trained world-class scientists, world-class engineers, as shown by their advances in industries, in space race, in the military. They always only focused on specific things, which was one of their big failures. Like they focused like on steel production. They had amazing steel factories, but then like apart from like military shit, they didn't actually make very useful stuff with it. There are problems with centralized government centralized plans, but they were successful at certain things.
Oh yeah, they were successful. They were successful at certain things, but then it all led to the downfall. Okay, very successful. Yeah. All right. So the reason why I want to kind of like push back on the USSR being a world power back then is because it was that way because we perceived it that way. But for most of the time, when we like have a post hoc analysis after the downfall of the Soviet Union, most people will say we greatly overestimated their power capabilities.
Yeah,
their strength as a superpower. Their strength as a superpower was greatly overestimated. And a lot of the times it was like looking at their land size, because like depending on what map you see, depending on like what distortions that gives you, Russia's fucking huge. But and like people get scared by size.
Okay, real political analysis aren't looking at a map and going, "Damn, Russia looks real big right now."
Yeah, I think it was mostly informed by
back then it had because like land really had no significance to a country's power back then. Yeah, totally not. It's not like you could grow more food in order to have more population in order to like. Come on, Elysium. This is not a real point. Okay.
Yours not a real point. There's no serious political analysis that was going like, damn, that's a lot of land.
Yeah, except in the United States we're a democracy. Except in the United States we're a democracy, and then a lot of foreign policy decisions are influenced by public opinion. And so then when average people look at what was the default dominant map that was used, and we look at Russia, they're like, holy shit, Russia's fucking huge.
Okay.
Elysium, do you deny that when you were a kid and you looked at a Mercator map and you saw Russia, you were like, and you didn't go like, oh my god, Russia's fucking huge. Look at the United States, we're so tiny.
Ciao, isn't...
Did you not go like that? All right, most people are like that as a child.
Let's go.
I struggle to understand how it was exaggerated when we're talking about the second largest military in the world, which was also a nuclear power with transcontinental strike capabilities. Whatever you might think of how actually effective their military was, not to mention they had ideological and military projection throughout the entire Cold War by funding and establishing communist groups throughout the world.
A coalition
But
of
also,
countries.
even if we pretend that doesn't matter, nuclear arms are the great equalizer then, because they could first strike US, the US could first strike them. That we had mutually assured destruction. On that level, the US and USSR were on the same level.
Okay, ciao.
That's okay. They weren't on tier with the European powers. I agree, and European Western powers, I guess we can say. I don't think that's controversial. But like, I don't think we need to minimize that they were a superpower either, and a competitive superpower. And now we can look at them now, and they're no longer a competitive superpower. And there's a striking difference there. That's what I was really getting at when I was calling them irrelevant. Just that their fall from grace has been drastic. So I don't want to say they're irrelevant. I agree.
Russia.
Do you understand what I'm saying right now? I agree. Irrelevant was a bad word to use.
You keep on contradicting yourself from previous statements.
Okay, sorry.
Elysium, a couple of weeks ago, you're like, yo, Russia's trying to get back, and they're doing all these things. Look at what they're doing to Ukraine. What happened, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now you're saying that they're irrelevant, they're uncompetitive, and they're nothing that to be concerned about, question mark?
Well, when you compare them to Ukraine, they are quite powerful. But when you compare them to the modern superpowers of the United States, the European Union, and China, no, they don't look that good anymore. Does that make sense? So they are definitely a threat to Ukraine. They are not irrelevant. I'm sorry, that was a poor choice of words for sure.
So then to what point is that?
This is all just spawned.
What are you prescribing to me? Should I not care about Russia?
I'm prescribing that calling them irrelevant was a poor choice of words on my part, and that they are not irrelevant. They are still relevant. Their fall from grace of being a superpower has been drastic. That is what I'm prescribing.
That's been drastic. Do you think Russia currently is stronger than the USSR before?
No. Relatively, like if you're going to compare them, in terms of like, yeah, does that make sense?
I think it depends on what USSR. Like, it's definitely stronger than the
I'm not
beginning.
Sure. I'm not sure. Then what is the point of them calling them? Oh, they're fall from grace. Oh, they're no longer the number 2. Now they're number 4. Oh boy.
Because
fall.
Because it is a huge fall. Because without
from number 2 to number 4.
Because that entire economy is built on oil right now, and oil is a industry that is phasing out over the course of the next 40 to 50
he's
years.
Repeating the oil thing. Go.
I mean, that is entirely relevant. If your entire economy right now has not been able to branch out, has like receded instead of growing, and you're relying on something,
they're trying to branch out their economy.
Yeah,
they understand
because their economy is
their
sanctioned off. I disagree with this too, because the primary driver for tensions with Ukraine that I see is way more political than anything economical. It is more about like reestablishing the idea of Russia as being the USSR, as like reestablishing its dominance seems to be all the political messaging that I see around Putin.
Well, yeah, because it's political messaging. Do you think economic messaging is good as political messaging?
Well, yeah, absolutely. People care about the economy a bunch. What do you mean?
I disagree.
Okay.
I think people care about the economy. This is true. But they care about the economy in different ways. In the way that I care about what is in my wallet, but I don't really care about GDP. I care about, I may not care really about the stock market, but more so how it affects my 401k. That is how people care about the economy. So then typically, if you're going to be having a political message on economics, you're probably not going to be talking about stuff that actually affects the entire nation, unless you're going through some sort of a, nationwide crisis.
Sure, but Ukraine doesn't change that economic position very much. It doesn't get them any access to new markets in the West and stuff. Like now, Russia's huge economic problems are being are corruption and being sanctioned off from the rest of the world's markets. Like, and these are like the underlying issues that are wrecking Russia's economy, as far as I understand it.
Okay, you just said Ukraine's market it is like what? Is nothing? Can you elaborate on that?
So yeah, okay. So say the ideal situation where Russia annexes all of Ukraine. Now all that you've gained there is still now falling under all the same sanctions. So yes, you have gained Ukraine's market
Why hold on.
because you're
Why
now
annex?
Russia,
Why
and
why are you
Russia had
using why are you
sanctions.
using the word annex?
What word do you want? I said the ideal situation. I think that would be
The
Russia's ideal outcome.
situation. Why would that be the ideal situation for Russia?
Okay, what would Russia's ideal situation be then?
Well, I
That
wouldn't
seems
even use the word ideal. If anything, I would just say one of Russia's goals is to establish closer ties to Ukraine than where it is right now. In the fact that Ukraine is, well, really, really close with the EU and really, really far away from Russia.
there's no way to
And
do that
and
anymore.
that within
They
within
had
it,
that.
there's
And
they
Ukraine started to
they
move away
had
from
that
them.
and it's drifting away
They
and they're trying to get it
invaded
back.
them. Okay, but you can't get that back. If you have invaded
Why
someone
not?
and you are causing a civil war in that country, you can't just be like, hey guys, we just want to be closer diplomatically. You fucked that up when you started aggressive actions, military actions. When you've like caused thousands of deaths in a country,
Yeah.
you fucked over your diplomatic, we just want to be buddies narrative.
Well, wasn't that the USSR? It was
No!
and then Russia.
That was Russia!
It was
Crimea.
satellite
10
states.
years ago, and
Satellite
continuing
states,
on
no.
to this day. No, that was 10
Okay.
years ago, coming on to now.
Could,
The
could
Donbass
it
region
not be
civil
possible?
war
Could it
is
not be possible
ongoing.
that Russia just wants Ukraine as like some sort of a satellite state?
Okay, it does, obviously. But
Would
you
that
don't
be
get to do that
annexation?
through diplomatic means now. You do that through force. That would be pseudo-annexation if
Would
you want to
that
be a puppet
called,
state.
Would that be called annexation?
I don't know. It would be a puppet state.
Okay, all right. So then, I wasn't wrong. They don't have to annex Ukraine.
I never said they have to. I just said I used the word ideal there, which apparently has caused a huge affront and into this other thing. But like, I would still
so
defend that
then-
that's the ideal
Yep, so
situation
then-
for Russia.
Sure. You know what?
So,
I'm away
puppet
from
state
that.
or not?
Excuse me.
Annexed or puppet state, we can look at Belarus. Being a puppet state of Russia doesn't fare well for your economy either. You get all the same sanctions because being a puppet state, you have to deny people their civil liberties and their free elections. And now you're in the same exact fucked state as Russia, right? So I don't see how the situation changes drastically
Yeah,
for
except
Russia in either of
now
these
they
outcomes.
have a market, and now they have a market in which they could sell their manufactured goods to, which would then boost their GDP.
That is great. Like, okay, that is definitely like a benefit, but that doesn't give you access to the rest of the world's markets, which is what you really want.
Yeah, but okay, so I already said this before. Do you not believe that like what Paul Krugman is saying? Do you know who Paul Krugman is, by the way?
No.
PhD economist. I don't know if that was sarcastic. You
Oh,
actually
the
don't know.
Twitter guy. Is that who you're talking about?
He is on Twitter, like a lot of people. He is on Twitter.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I know who you're talking about.
Okay, so then I said this before. I don't know if that like kind of went over your head. Is that kind of his theory or his idea about like a self-sustaining market is like nowadays you have to have 250 million people, and so then
Russia
with
could have all the
Ukraine's-
people in the world, but its corruption is always going to prevent any real market that's self-sustaining like that.
and
This doesn't work.
And I agree. I agree with that. But this okay. So then this is what you're doing to me. Okay, here's this multifaceted problem that Russia has with its economy. And I am talking about how Russia is looking at Ukraine through some sort of a lens, one lens, okay, which is an economic lens that could solve maybe one part of that multifaceted problem. And you are
Mhm.
throwing at me as a counter all the other problems that it has, as if to say that, well, my analysis is what, like dumb. Okay.
I understand. Okay,
Do you
so
recognize
when
that is what
you
you're
first
doing?
Sure, and I'll explain why. Because when you first brought this up and you asked me what's wrong with Russia's economy, I said the two primary things that I understand is its corruption of being like
Did
a
I ask you
mafia
that?
state
Fuck me.
and its sanctions from the rest of the world's markets. So both of these things seem to be like the two underlying issues that are crippling the Russian economy and causing it to continue to decline. And so far, none of the situation that we've talked about with Ukraine and the little ad seems to like address either of those things. And so we were talking about it being an increase in the market. And so any gains in that market wouldn't, in my opinion, become self-sustaining or like enough to address the underlying problem of corruption. And so those both still feel like relevant critiques of any action being useful in that analysis.
I didn't get how they were relevant. I mean, so then like you're saying that, how about this? You are saying that any sort of benefit that Russia is going to be getting from accessing Ukraine's markets, my argument, is then going to be, well, not covered, is going to kind of be canceled out. It's going to be canceled out by all the negative stuff that is going to be occurring because
Of
what
invading
Russia
another
did.
country. Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
and that is what you're saying. It's going to get canceled out.
So I mean, I would agree with that. But like before we were just talking about how like these wouldn't solve any
So
Russian
then your
problems.
argument really is like, I'm bringing up a minor problem and you have these two big problems, and because the minor solution is not going to be dealing with the two big problems, then that's a point against me. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and
That is
it
stupid.
makes it
That
well,
is
it makes
fucking
it
stupid.
okay, and it
Okay,
also
easy.
makes it seem that the political motivation of regaining the USSR mantle seems to be much more important than any economic motivation. That's
Like
how I would
I
interpret this
Do
situation.
you not
but
think?
that's
Do you
fine.
not think that economics and politics are intertwined? Do you not think that maybe
Yeah?
they could both coexist at the same time?
But as you were saying, if those are mine, it doesn't matter. Okay, sure.
like
They definitely
honest,
coexist.
Once again,
Go.
again, nothing points. Holy shit.
yeah. Honestly, like it's obviously clear that Russia is trying to like reestablish their whole idea of like still being a superpower. I definitely agree with that because of the fact that their way of power, right? Like how they are doing diplomatic stuff is through hard power, only like hard power and maybe uh, some some soft power in the sense of like Russian pot farms and that kind of shit. Um, but yeah, so I genuinely think that the move to invade like Crimea uh, was basically to re-establish that hard power because Crimea is like strategical when it comes to having a port that's a hot water port, right? Compared to St. Petersburg, which is like frozen for 6 months in a year. So yeah, I definitely think it has to do with like a lot of hard power. And then being said, like for Ukraine itself, I think they wanted to move away from Russia overall because of the fact that they saw that the Western world is basically better to export to. When you look to Ukraine, Ukraine always has been called the grain uh, barn of Europe. Like
Mhm.
this has been historical. This is what like when Hitler said like Lebensraum, he was pretty much like alluding to like Ukraine a lot of times because of the fact that he was saying like I wanna get that part because of the fact that it produces like loads of food and that kind of shit and
To support a growing population and support a growing industry.
yeah for Germany and basically like yeah the Ukraine right now probably cannot access the market of like exporting food because of the fact that again this is what I mentioned like 10 times in several podcasts about like agricultural subsidies within Europe basically fucking over other countries. In 1991 we did it to Russia, destroying their agricultural market. And yeah, we probably did it to Ukraine then as well, I would
Mhm.
assume. So yeah, I definitely see like more incentives for Ukraine to
I mean,
basically ally with like with Europe.
the best incentive is to be able to look at the Baltic states that have gotten out of Russia's influence and like how they've been able to prosper. You'll look at Poland, how it's gotten out of Russia's influence and how it's been able to prosper. And if you're Ukraine and you look at that, you're like, dang, if I can get out of Russia's influence, I'm gonna be able to prosper too.
Name, do you want to respond to that? The Poland?
I'm Poland, sure. I know Poland's the fucking great economic success of the like Eastern European ex-satellite states. Ukraine. My impression was that Ukraine, like I understand the subsidies, like obviously we're fucking over Ukraine, but my understanding was that Ukraine, going into the 21st century, was considered by many as like one of the granaries of Europe. That their agriculture was actually very successful and exporting into the EU. And my understanding also, like earlier I mentioned, the geopolitical interest that that Putin would have by embroiling Ukraine in a conflict. They make it impossible for NATO or the EU to officially take them in. Obviously, my understanding is also that Crimea is a big part of why, as a region, a big part of why Ukraine was an agricultural powerhouse. I guess we can use that term. And definitely like there are three phases here, right? There's a port on the Black Sea, agricultural land, very fertile land, and blocking off NATO and EU expansion. So like right now we're talking about the economic interest there for Russia in annexing that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and on the buddy stuff, like honestly, like if you invade a country, you're not gonna be buddies anymore.
If you invade a country, okay, that country doesn't exist anymore. You don't need to be buddies anymore.
Well, you can invade partly a country, or you can make it a puppet state, right?
Yes, and so then
those
there's
are
no need to be buddies anymore if it's a puppet state. You literally have them
Well,
break
then-
streams. That's why they're called puppet states.
Yeah, but for international terms, it's like, oh, we are buddies again. Like you wouldn't say on the international stage, you wouldn't say like, oh, Belarus, that's just a puppet state. Like you would still recognize that as like a legitimate government, right? You wouldn't say like, oh, Russia can speak for them or something.
For Belarus? Isn't
Yeah.
Belarus like kind of called a puppet state by
It's called that's
being controlled by the Kremlin?
It's called a puppet state because it's like underneath all the things, right? It's basically controlled by Russia. But that being said, like they are still considered a country that's independent from Russia and not considered Russia on the international stage. Like nobody, if the Dutch Prime Minister were to say like, "Oh, Belarus, that's just a puppet state," that would cause like
then I guess
international.
Belarus and Russia are they truly are buddy buddies then?
Yeah, because it's like quote unquote like a puppet state.
Yeah, so in the same way that Russia takes over Ukraine and then puts a puppet state, and then the puppet state of Ukraine is like, oh yeah, we're really nice to Russia. Then I guess they're buddy buddies too, right? Even after the invasion.
if they were to do that, like if they were to invade Ukraine right now, which I don't think they would like necessarily do, but if they were to invade Ukraine right now and they put like a puppet state there, or then they would be buddy. But right now, they aren't. Ukraine and Russia aren't like buddy because of the fact that they got invaded and parts of their country is being taken, and in eastern Ukraine they basically support like Russian separatists and that kind of stuff. So yeah, right now that's not the situation, right?
Yeah. So then, what do you guys like think that the split of Ukraine and Russia started with Crimea?
No, that it
Okay,
started
all right.
earlier. Started
Yeah.
earlier with like getting like pro EU parties in place,
All right,
and
wanted
that
that to be
caused
clear
the
because
Crimea.
some people made it sound like that. Yeah,
But
so it was
Elysium
happening a
made
lot
that.
earlier. So it was happening a lot earlier. So then, like, couldn't we say that the invasion of Russia into Crimea would be like, by the political analysis of Russia, hypothetically speaking, was like there's no way in which we could there's no avenue in order to get Ukraine onto our side besides like aggression.
Yeah, because they
mean-
only take it hard power. Russia,
Yeah,
pretty
They
much.
someone
only
can
take it
say
hard
that,
power?
but
Pretty
like,
much.
yeah,
Let's see.
They only do the hard power game on the diplomatic level, right? That's pretty much Russia in a nutshell.
Okay, you know what? It sounds a bit reductive, but I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Yeah, I understand. Like honestly, like that they have like soft power stuff as well, but they are known for hard power politics. Would you agree with that, Chow?
I mean, maybe from like a United States perspective, like it's everything that they do is going to be hard power. But then, like, what was really interesting before is that Elysium was talking about how Russia is going to be arming the rebels, so that the rebels could like, well, fight a civil war in Ukraine for like to
Yeah.
retake Russia, to retake Ukraine for Russia, right? And then he goes on to say that what the United States could do is we could send our military there to fight, or we could give them our own weapons. We could sell them our weapons, as if like these two things are like completely different, in which they're not. Then like it's really interesting that when it comes to security, we kind of have like this bias when it comes to like, hey, whatever